I will never forget the moment my own family looked me straight in the eye and lied about being broke. It happened during what I thought would be a normal Tuesday dinner at my childhood home in suburban Denver. My mother, Patricia, sat across from me at the same oak table where I had eaten thousands of meals, her face serious as she delivered news that would shatter my trust forever. My brother Marcus lounged in his chair with that smug expression I had grown to hate, already knowing what was coming. The family reunion trip to Hawaii that I had been planning and anticipating for 6 months was suddenly canceled, and I was the reason. 3 days later, I sat in my cubicle at Morrison & Associates Accounting, staring at spreadsheets, but unable to concentrate on the numbers that usually came so naturally to me. The Denver skyline stretched beyond my 14th floor window, but all I could think about was that devastating conversation with my family. My coworker, Daniel Rodriguez, rolled his chair over to my desk, concern written across his weathered face. Daniel had worked in accounting for over 20 years and had become something of a mentor to me since I started at the firm 2 years ago. "Bobby, you look like someone ran over your dog," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "What's eating at you?" I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of disappointment settling on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. "It's my family, Daniel. We were supposed to take this big reunion trip to Hawaii this summer. 4 generations of Thompsons, including my mom, my brother Marcus, his wife Jennifer, and their twin daughters Emma and Grace. I've been saving for months, got the time off approved, even bought new luggage." Daniel nodded sympathetically, waiting for me to continue. "But Tuesday night, Mom drops this bomb on me. Says the family is going through financial difficulties, and they can't afford to take me along." Marcus was sitting right there laughing about it, telling me I should be grateful to stay home and save them some money. The words tasted bitter as I spoke them. So I offered to give up my spot, told them to take the trip without me. "That's rough, man," Daniel said, shaking his head. "Family financial troubles can tear everyone apart. But hey, at least you're being supportive." I wanted to agree to feel good about my sacrifice, but something nagged at me. The thing is, Daniel, I can't shake this feeling that something doesn't add up. Marcus has been posting all over social media about his new BMW lease and his country club membership. Just last month, Jennifer was showing off photos from their weekend in Aspen. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "Doesn't sound very broke to me." "That's what I keep thinking, but I feel terrible for doubting them. Maybe they're just trying to keep up appearances while struggling behind the scenes. I mean, people do that all the time, right?" "Sure they do." Daniel agreed, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "But your gut is usually right about these things, Bobby. You're one of the sharpest accountants I've worked with. If the numbers don't add up in your personal life, maybe there's a reason for that." After work, I found myself driving through Marcus's neighborhood in the affluent suburb of Cherry Hills Village, about 20 minutes south of downtown Denver. I told myself I was just taking the scenic route home, but deep down, I knew I was looking for answers. Marcus's house sat on a corner lot that had to be worth at least $800,000. The pristine lawn stretched for what looked like half an acre, maintained with the kind of precision that screamed expensive landscaping service. A new outdoor kitchen dominated the backyard, complete with a built-in grill pizza oven and granite countertops that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The children's playground equipment in the far corner of the yard looked like something from a high-end resort, with custom wooden structures, multiple slides, and safety surfaces that had clearly been professionally installed. This wasn't the backyard of a family struggling financially. I parked across the street and sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, feeling increasingly confused and angry. The cognitive dissonance between what I was seeing and what my family had told me was becoming impossible to ignore. My phone buzzed with a notification from social media. Marcus had posted a check-in status at Denver International Airport with the caption, "Family adventure begins now, first class all the way." The photo showed him, Jennifer, and the twins standing next to their luggage, which appeared to be a matching set of expensive designer suitcases. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The timestamp showed the post had been made just 30 minutes ago. They were actually going to Hawaii. Without me. After telling me they couldn't afford it. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't about money at all. This was about something else entirely, something that made my stomach churn with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I drove home to my modest apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, my mind racing with questions that demanded answers. My one-bedroom place was clean and comfortable, furnished with pieces I had carefully selected and saved for over the past few years. Everything reflected my methodical approach to finances, my belief in living within my means, while building toward bigger goals. But sitting in my living room that night, staring at Marcus's social media photos from the airport, I realized that my careful financial planning and my trust in my family might have been the biggest mistakes of my life. The seeds of doubt that Daniel had helped plant earlier that day were now growing into something much darker. If my family could lie to me so easily about something this big, what else had they been hiding? 1 week later, I found myself walking through the familiar corridors of Denver International Airport, my carry-on bag slung over my shoulder, as I headed toward my gate for a work conference in Phoenix. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was traveling for business while my family was supposedly enjoying their Hawaiian vacation, funded by my absence. I had booked the cheapest flight available, a cramped middle seat on a budget airline that would get me to Phoenix in time for my presentation to a potential client. As a junior accountant, I didn't have the luxury of expense account upgrades or premium seating. The airport was bustling with typical Thursday morning travelers, business people checking emails on their phones, while wheeling expensive luggage families herding children toward departure gates, and tourists clutching boarding passes with excitement. I navigated through the crowd following signs toward Concourse B. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The first-class boarding line for a Hawaiian Airlines flight was forming near Gate B7, and among the well-dressed passengers standing in the premium queue, I spotted two small figures that made my heart stop. Emma and Grace Thompson. My 7-year-old nieces were standing hand in hand wearing matching designer sundresses that I had never seen before. Their blonde hair was styled in elaborate braids, decorated with tropical flowers, and they each carried tiny rolling suitcases that coordinated perfectly with their outfits. I ducked behind a nearby pillar, my pulse racing, as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe it was just two little girls who happened to look similar to my nieces. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, because I was still upset about the canceled family trip. But then, I saw Jennifer emerge from the nearby Hudson News store, wearing a flowing white sundress and sandals that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Diamond earrings caught the terminal lighting as she walked, and the designer handbag on her arm was one I remembered her coveting in a magazine months earlier. My breath caught in my throat as Marcus appeared behind her, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts, looking relaxed and happy as he checked his Platinum Elite boarding pass. He was carrying what appeared to be a brand new camera bag and had a lei already draped around his neck. I pressed myself against the pillar, hoping they wouldn't notice me while I tried to process the scene unfolding before my eyes. This was impossible. My family had specifically told me they couldn't afford this trip. They had made me feel guilty for even considering coming along. They had allowed me to sacrifice my spot to help their financial situation. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. Hawaiian Airlines Flight 271 to Maui. We are now boarding our first-class passengers and Platinum Elite members. Please have your boarding passes and identification ready. I watched in stunned silence as Marcus approached the podium, his elite status clearly recognized by the airline staff. The gate agent smiled warmly as she scanned his boarding pass. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said loud enough for me to hear from my hiding spot. "Thank you for choosing Hawaiian Airlines again. I see you're one of our Platinum Elite members. We have you and your family in first-class seats today." "Thank you," Marcus replied confidently. "My girls are so excited for their first trip to Maui. We're planning to stay at the Grand Wiley Resort, The Grand Waila. I had researched that resort when we were originally planning the family trip. Rooms started at over $600 per night, and that was before resort fees, meals, and activities. As my family disappeared down the jet bridge, I caught a glimpse of their luggage rolling behind them. Not only were they traveling with more bags than I had ever seen them carry, but every piece appeared to be from the same high-end luggage collection, complete with leather tags and brass hardware. I stumbled toward the nearest bathroom, my legs feeling unsteady, as the full weight of their deception crashed over me. Locked in a stall, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Marcus's social media again, looking for clues I might have missed. There it was, posted just 40 minutes earlier, a photo of champagne glasses with the caption, "Nothing beats first-class travel with my beautiful family. Maui. Here we come." The betrayal was complete. Not only had they lied about being unable to afford the trip, they had upgraded to first-class seating and were staying at one of the most expensive resorts in Hawaii. Meanwhile, I was sitting in an airport bathroom flying budget airline to a work conference, believing I had done the right thing by stepping aside. My phone rang, and I saw Daniel's name on the screen. I answered, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "Bobby, you sound strange. Are you okay?" "Daniel, I just saw my family at the airport. They're boarding a first-class flight to Maui right now." There was a long pause. "I thought you said they couldn't afford the trip." "So did I," I whispered, leaning against the bathroom wall. "But here they are, traveling in luxury while I believed their sob story about financial hardship." "That's not a financial mistake, Bobby," Daniel said grimly. "That's deliberate deception. The question you need to ask yourself is why your own family would lie to you like this." As I sat on that airplane to Phoenix an hour later, cramped between a businessman who hogged the armrest and a college student who snored loudly, I realized that Daniel was absolutely right. This wasn't about money. This was about something much worse. And I was going to find out exactly what that something was. Returning from Phoenix, 2 days later, I sat in my apartment surrounded by documents, bank statements, and legal papers spread across my coffee table like pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve. My accounting background had taught me that numbers never lied, even when people did, and I was going to use every skill I had learned to uncover the truth about my family's finances. The first step was researching public records, something I had access to through my work at the accounting firm. Property records for Jefferson County were available online, and I started with Marcus's house in Cherry Hills Village. What I discovered made my stomach drop. The property had been purchased 2 years earlier for $795,000, with a substantial down payment of $300,000. For a house in that price range, banks typically required at least 20% down, but Marcus had put down nearly 40% of the purchase price in cash. I cross-referenced the purchase date with my own records and realized this was just 6 months after our grandmother Rose Thompson had passed away. Grandmother Rose had been the family matriarch, a woman who had built a successful small business and had always promised that her estate would be divided equally among her 3 grandchildren, Marcus, myself, and our cousin Lisa, who lived in California. But I had never received any inheritance paperwork. At the time, Patricia had told me that grandmother's estate was complicated and tied up in legal proceedings. She had suggested that I focus on my career and not worry about inheritance matters that might take years to resolve. Digging deeper into the property records, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Patricia Thompson was listed as a co-owner on not just Marcus's house, but on 2 other rental properties in the Denver metro area. According to the records, she had purchased these investment properties within the past 18 months, paying cash for both. I calculated the total value Marcus's house, plus a duplex in the Highlands neighborhood, worth $450,000, plus a condo in downtown Denver, worth $325,000. Patricia and Marcus controlled real estate worth over $1.5 million purchased with cash in the span of 2 years. This level of wealth acquisition was impossible on their stated incomes. Marcus worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized company and Patricia was a retired school administrator living on a pension. There was no way they could have accumulated this much liquid cash through their legitimate earnings. The next step was examining bank records, which I had access to through shared family accounts established years earlier to manage grandmother's care expenses. These accounts had never been officially closed after her death, and as a named party, I still had legal access to the statements. What I found in those statements was even more shocking than the property records. Over the past 2 years, there had been a series of large deposits from something called the Thompson Family Trust, totaling nearly $600,000. The deposits corresponded exactly with the dates of the real estate purchases, and each one was followed immediately by wire transfers to various title companies and real estate attorneys. I had never heard of any Thompson Family Trust. I spent the next several hours researching trust law and estate planning, using resources available through my firm's legal database. What I learned made me realize that I was looking at something much more serious than family favoritism, or even greed. According to Colorado state law, when someone dies without a valid will, their estate is distributed according to specific legal formulas. But Grandmother Rose had always told us she had a will, and she had specifically mentioned wanting to ensure all her grandchildren were treated equally. I called the law office that had handled Grandmother's legal affairs, a small practice in downtown Denver, run by an attorney named Michael Harrison. I explained that I was Rose Thompson's grandson and that I had questions about the estate settlement. Mr. Thompson. The secretary said, "I'll need to check with Mr. Harrison, but I believe your grandmother's estate was settled nearly 2 years ago. All beneficiaries were contacted at that time." "I was never contacted," I said. "Can you tell me who the beneficiaries were listed as?" After a brief hold, she returned to the line. "According to our records, the estate was distributed to Patricia Thompson and Marcus Thompson. There's a notation here that Robert Thompson waived his inheritance rights." Robert. That was my legal name, though. I had gone by Bobby since childhood. "I never waived any inheritance rights," I said, my voice rising. "I was never even told there was an inheritance to waive." There was a long silence. "Mr. Thompson, I think you need to speak with Mr. Harrison directly. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing bank statements from my own accounts, looking for any clues I might have missed. What I discovered was the final piece of the puzzle, and it was the most devastating revelation yet. Over the past year, there had been a series of small but consistent transfers from my savings account to an account I didn't recognize. The transfers were modest enough that I hadn't noticed them in my monthly reviews, usually between $50 and $100 each, occurring every few weeks. But when I added them up, they totaled over $3,000. The receiving account had a routing number I was able to trace through my banking contacts at work. It belonged to a business account registered under Thompson Family Enterprises, with Marcus listed as the primary account holder and Patricia as a secondary signer. They had been systematically draining my savings account while telling me they were broke. I called my bank's customer service line and was transferred to the fraud department. The representative, a woman named Linda Foster, listened patiently as I explained the unauthorized transfers. "Mr. Thompson, I'm looking at your account history now. These transfers were all authorized through online banking using your login credentials. Do you recall setting up these automatic transfers?" "Absolutely not," I said. "I would never authorize transfers to an account I've never heard of." "I understand your concern. Let me check something else." There was a pause as she typed. "I see here that in March of last year, we have a record of you coming into our Cherry Creek branch to add Marcus Thompson as an authorized user on your account. You signed the paperwork and provided identification." My heart stopped. March of last year was when I had been in the hospital for emergency appendix surgery, followed by a week of recovery at home while heavily medicated for pain. "I was in the hospital in March," I said. "I was unconscious for surgery and then on pain medication for a week. There's no way I could have signed anything at your bank." Linda's tone became much more serious. "Mr. Thompson, If someone used your identification while you were incapacitated to gain access to your accounts, that's identity theft and fraud. This is something we need to investigate immediately. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my family's betrayal was even deeper and more calculated than I had imagined. They hadn't just lied about being broke or excluded me from an inheritance that was rightfully mine. They had systematically stolen from me while I was vulnerable, using my medical emergency as an opportunity to gain access to my accounts. But what hurt most wasn't the money. It was the realization that while I was recovering from surgery, worrying about medical bills, and lost work time, my own mother and brother were in a bank forging documents and planning how to steal from me. The people I had trusted most in the world had been treating me like a mark in a long con, and I had been too naive and trusting to see it happening. But I wasn't naive anymore, and I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of every lie they had told and every dollar they had stolen. The next morning, I sat in attorney Michael Harrison's downtown office, surrounded by mahogany bookshelves and legal certificates that spoke to decades of experience in estate law. Harrison was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that grew increasingly troubled as I explained my situation. Mr. Thompson, I have to tell you that this is one of the most disturbing cases of family fraud I've encountered in 35 years of practice, he said, reviewing the documents spread across his conference table. Your grandmother specifically came to me 2 years before her death to update her will, and she was very clear about her intentions. He opened a thick file folder and withdrew several documents. Rose Thompson's final will explicitly states that her estate was to be divided equally among her 3 grandchildren, Marcus Thompson, Robert Thompson, and Lisa Chen in California. She was adamant that each grandchild receive exactly 1/3 of her assets, which totaled approximately $600,000 after debts and expenses. Then, how did Patricia and Marcus end up with everything I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer? Harrison's expression darkened. 3 months after your grandmother's funeral, Patricia and Marcus came to my office with what they claimed were updated documents. They presented a notarized statement, supposedly signed by you, waiving all rights to the inheritance and transferring your share to be divided between Marcus and Patricia. He handed me a photocopy of the document. My supposed signature was at the bottom, but even to my untrained eye, it looked nothing like my actual handwriting. I never signed this, I said. I've never even seen this document before. I suspected as much, Harrison said grimly. At the time, I questioned the authenticity of the signature and insisted on calling you directly to confirm. But Patricia told me you were dealing with serious personal issues and had specifically asked not to be contacted about inheritance matters because they were too emotionally difficult. That's completely false, I said, feeling anger building in my chest. I was never contacted by anyone about any inheritance. I didn't even know there was an inheritance to discuss. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we're looking at multiple felonies, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. But it gets worse. Let me show you something else. He opened another folder and withdrew a document that made my blood freeze. It was a power of attorney form, supposedly signed by me, and dated during my hospitalization for appendix surgery. This document gives Patricia Thompson complete authority over your financial affairs, including the ability to access your bank accounts, sign legal documents on your behalf, and make investment decisions with your money. According to this paperwork, you granted this authority due to your inability to handle your financial affairs while recovering from medical treatment. I never signed this either, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I was unconscious for most of that week, and when I was awake, I was heavily sedated. There's no way I would have been competent to sign any legal documents. Medical records would support that, Harrison agreed. But with this power of attorney, Patricia had legal authority to do essentially whatever she wanted with your finances. And according to the bank records you've brought me, she used that authority extensively. Harrison spread out financial documents that painted a picture of systematic theft spanning over a year. The Thompson Family Trust that I had discovered was actually funded entirely with money from grandmother's estate, plus additional funds taken from my own accounts using the fraudulent power of attorney. Your family has stolen approximately $150,000 from your inheritance, plus another $35,000 from your personal accounts. Harrison calculated. They've used these funds to purchase real estate finance luxury purchases and maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their legitimate income. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Harrison opened one final folder, his expression grim. I've done some additional research since you called yesterday, and I discovered something very troubling. Your grandmother's will was modified just weeks before her death, while she was in hospice care. The changes removed specific provisions she had made for your education and career development. He showed me a comparison between the original will and the final version. In the original document, Grandmother Rose had specifically set aside $50,000 for me to pursue graduate education, with a note that she believed in my potential and wanted to ensure I had every opportunity to succeed. The final will signed just days before her death, while she was heavily medicated for pain, removed this provision entirely. Harrison explained. I have serious doubts about whether your grandmother was competent to make such changes at that time, especially given that the modifications only benefited Patricia and Marcus. Are you saying they manipulated a dying woman to change her will? I asked, horrified. I can't prove it in court without additional evidence, but the timing and nature of the changes are highly suspicious. Combined with the forged documents they used to steal your inheritance, it suggests a pattern of manipulation and fraud that began even before your grandmother's death. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. Bobby, I need you to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here. Your family didn't just make a mistake or act impulsively. They planned and executed a sophisticated fraud that was designed to permanently deprive you of your inheritance while enriching themselves. But why? I asked. Why would they go to such lengths to steal from me? It's not like I was refusing to share or being unreasonable about money. From what I can piece together from the documents and timeline, I believe Patricia was the mastermind, Harrison said carefully. The pattern suggests she convinced Marcus that you somehow didn't deserve equal treatment, possibly by portraying you as irresponsible or undeserving of the inheritance. He showed me bank records indicating that Marcus had been hesitant initially, with several deposits being reversed or delayed. But eventually, she persuaded him to participate fully. The luxury purchases and real estate investments began shortly after that. So Marcus was manipulated too. Initially, perhaps. But by the time they were forging power of attorney documents and stealing from your bank accounts, he was a full participant. The legal system won't distinguish between the mastermind and the accomplice when it comes to fraud of this magnitude. Harrison gathered the documents and looked at me seriously. Bobby, you have grounds for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The evidence is overwhelming, and the amounts involved make this a serious felony case. But I need you to understand that pursuing this will likely destroy whatever remains of your relationship with your family. They destroyed that relationship when they decided to steal from me. I said, my voice steady, despite the emotional turmoil I was feeling. What are my options? We can file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to recover everything they've stolen, plus damages and legal fees. Given the strength of the evidence, I believe we can recover the full amount and potentially more. And what about the family relationships? Is there any possibility of resolving this without destroying everyone? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. In my experience, fraud of this magnitude doesn't happen because of misunderstandings or poor communication. It happens because people make deliberate choices to prioritize their own financial gain over basic honesty and family loyalty. The question you need to ask yourself is whether you can trust people who have proven capable of such calculated betrayal. As I left Harrison's office that afternoon, I realized that my family's betrayal was even worse than I had initially understood. They hadn't just stolen money from me. They had robbed a dying woman's final wishes and twisted her love for her grandchildren into a tool for their own greed. But what hurt most was the realization that while I was lying in a hospital bed, worried about medical bills, and getting back to work, my own mother was in a law office forging documents that would steal my future from me. The Bobby Thompson who had walked into that office an hour earlier still believed that family loyalty and forgiveness could overcome any obstacle. The Bobby Thompson who walked out knew that some betrayals were too deep and too calculated to ever be forgiven. And I was about to make sure that Patricia and Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. Over the next 2 weeks, Attorney Harrison and I worked together to build an ironclad case that would not only recover everything my family had stolen, but would ensure they faced the full legal consequences of their actions. My methodical accounting background proved invaluable as we documented every fraudulent transaction, forged signature, and unauthorized transfer. Harrison brought in a handwriting expert, Dr. Stephen Walsh, who analyzed the forged documents under microscopic examination. His conclusions were damning. The signatures attributed to me were obviously forged with inconsistencies in pen pressure letter formation and natural writing flow that would be impossible to replicate if I had actually signed the documents. Mr. Thompson. Dr. Walsh explained during our consultation, whoever forged these signatures was amateur at best. They clearly practiced your signature from examples, probably driver's license or bank signature cards, but they couldn't replicate the unconscious muscle memory that creates authentic signatures. The evidence was overwhelming. We had forensic proof of forgery bank records showing unauthorized transfers, medical records confirming my incapacitation during key dates, and legal documents that had been fraudulently notarized. But Harrison suggested a strategic approach that would maximize both financial recovery and personal satisfaction. Bobby, we could file criminal charges immediately and let the prosecutor handle this as a felony fraud case. He explained during one of our planning sessions. Patricia and Marcus would likely face several years in prison, and you would eventually recover your money through criminal restitution orders. But I sensed there was another option. But criminal cases can take years to resolve, and restitution often goes unpaid because defendants don't have assets left after legal fees and fines. I'd recommend we start with a civil lawsuit that gives them an opportunity to make this right before we involve criminal prosecutors. You mean give them a chance to return the money voluntarily? Exactly. We file a comprehensive civil suit demanding return of all stolen funds, plus damages, interest, and legal fees. We present them with irrefutable evidence and give them 30 days to respond. If they comply fully, we can resolve this without criminal charges. If they refuse or try to fight it, we hand everything over to the district attorney and pursue both civil and criminal remedies simultaneously. The strategy made sense from both a practical and emotional perspective. I wanted my family to have an opportunity to admit their mistakes and make things right, even though I doubted they would take it. Harrison introduced me to a private investigator named Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in financial fraud cases. Her job was to locate all assets that had been purchased with stolen money and ensure we had a complete picture of what needed to be recovered. Martinez's investigation revealed details that made me realize the extent of my family's deception. The luxury Hawaiian vacation I had witnessed at the airport was just the latest in a series of high-end trips funded with my inheritance money. Over the past 18 months, Marcus and Jennifer had traveled to Europe, taken multiple ski trips to Aspen, and spent thousands of dollars on luxury goods and experiences. Your brother has been living like he's wealthy, Martinez explained, showing me credit card statements and travel records. Designer clothes for his wife and children, expensive restaurants, private school tuition for the twins. They've been spending money faster than they can steal it. What does that mean for recovery? It means they're actually living paycheck to paycheck, despite having access to hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen money. The real estate investments your mother made are probably the only assets with any equity left. This revelation was both satisfying and concerning. It meant that Patricia and Marcus had burned through most of the stolen money on temporary pleasures while building an unsustainable lifestyle. But it also meant that financial recovery might require forcing the sale of properties and other assets, which would be devastating to their current living situation. Harrison helped me understand the broader implications of our legal strategy. If we pursue full recovery, Marcus will likely lose his house, Harrison explained. The down payment was made with stolen money, so we can force a sale and recover our funds from the proceeds. Patricia will have to sell her investment properties as well. Essentially, we'll be returning them to their actual financial position before they started stealing from you. What about Marcus's children? I asked, thinking about 7-year-old Emma and Grace. That's not your responsibility, Bobby. Their parents made choices that put those children at risk. You're not obligated to subsidize a lifestyle that was built on fraud just to protect children from the consequences of their parents' criminal behavior. The hardest part of the planning process was psychological rather than legal. I had to accept that the family I thought I knew had never really existed. The loving, supportive relationships I believed I had were built on lies and manipulation. But I also discovered something unexpected. Grandmother Rose had left more than just money. Among her personal effects, which Patricia had claimed were lost, Harrison found a safety deposit box that contained letters addressed to each of her grandchildren. My letter, written in grandmother's distinctive handwriting just months before her death, brought tears to my eyes. My dear Bobby, if you are reading this letter, it means I am gone, and you have reached an age where you can appreciate what I want to share with you. You have always been the most thoughtful and principled of my grandchildren, and I have watched you grow into a man of character and integrity. I am leaving you this inheritance not because you need it, but because I believe you will use it wisely. I have seen how carefully you manage your finances and how seriously you take your responsibilities. I trust you to use these resources to build a life that would make me proud. I also want you to know that I have concerns about your mother's attitudes toward money and fairness. She has occasionally suggested to me that you receive too much attention or support from the family, and I worry that she may try to interfere with my final wishes. If that happens, please remember that you deserve every opportunity for success and happiness, regardless of what anyone else might tell you. Use this inheritance to pursue your dreams, Bobby. Get that graduate degree you've always wanted. Buy a home where you can build a family of your own someday. And remember that the most important inheritance I can give you is the knowledge that you are loved and valued for exactly who you are. With all my love and faith in your future, Grandmother Rose. Reading that letter, I realized that Grandmother Rose had anticipated exactly what had happened. She had known Patricia might try to manipulate the inheritance, and she had tried to protect me from that manipulation even after her death. The letter also revealed why Patricia had been so determined to exclude me from the inheritance. It wasn't about money at all. It was about control jealousy and a resentment that had apparently been building for years. But Grandmother Rose had also given me something more valuable than money, the confirmation that I was worthy of love and respect, regardless of what my family had done to me. Armed with that knowledge, I was ready to fight back and reclaim not just my inheritance, but my dignity and self-respect. The time for being the understanding, accommodating family member was over. It was time for Patricia and Marcus to face the consequences of their choices. 3 weeks later, I sat across from my family in Harrison's conference room, watching their faces transform from confusion to shock to panic as they realized the extent of what I had uncovered. The mahogany table between us was covered with evidence of their fraud bank statements, forged documents, property records, and expert analysis that painted an undeniable picture of systematic theft. Patricia sat rigidly in her chair, her face pale but defiant. She had dressed formally for the meeting, as if her appearance could somehow legitimize what she had done. Marcus shifted nervously beside her, his usual smugness replaced by barely controlled anxiety. "I don't understand why we're here." Patricia began, her voice tight with forced control. "Bobby, if you're upset about the vacation, we can discuss that as a family. There's no need to involve lawyers." Harrison placed a thick folder in front of them and opened it to reveal the first document, Grandmother Rose's authentic will, showing the equal three-way inheritance distribution. "Mrs. Thompson, we're not here to discuss a vacation," Harrison said firmly. "We're here to address felony fraud identity theft and the systematic theft of over $185,000 from your son." Marcus's face went white. "Theft? That's insane. We never stole anything from Bobby." I leaned forward, my voice steady, despite the anger boiling inside me. "Marcus, I saw you boarding a first-class flight to Maui after telling me our family was too broke to afford taking me on vacation. I have bank records showing you've been systematically draining money from accounts that were funded with my inheritance. I have evidence that Mom forged my signature on legal documents while I was unconscious in the hospital." "That's not true," Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Your grandmother's will was very clear about the distribution of assets. You waived your inheritance rights because you said you didn't need the money." Harrison slid the forged waiver document across the table, along with Dr. Walsh's expert analysis. "Mrs. Thompson, we have forensic evidence proving this signature was forged. We also have medical records confirming that Bobby was incapacitated and legally unable to sign any documents during the time period when you claim he granted you power of attorney." The room fell silent as Patricia and Marcus stared at the evidence. I watched Marcus's face as he realized the full scope of what they had been caught doing. The cocky confidence he had shown at the family dinner was completely gone, replaced by the panicked expression of someone watching their world collapse. "Mom, you told me Bobby had agreed to this," Marcus said quietly, his voice cracking. "You said he didn't want the inheritance because he was focused on his career." "I was protecting the family," Patricia snapped. "Bobby is young and single. He doesn't have children to support or a mortgage to worry about. Marcus needed that money more than Bobby did." "That wasn't your decision to make," I said, my voice rising. "That money was left to me by Grandmother Rose. You had no right to steal it, no matter what you thought about my life choices." Harrison leaned forward, his tone becoming more serious. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, I need you to understand the legal situation you're facing. We have documentation of multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy. The total amount stolen exceeds $185,000, which makes this a Class 3 felony in Colorado, punishable by up to 12 years in prison." Marcus buried his face in his hands. "Oh God, what have we done?" "We have done nothing wrong," Patricia insisted, but her voice was shaking now. "I am Bobby's mother. I have every right to make decisions about what's best for this family." "Not when those decisions involve forging documents and stealing money," Harrison replied. "You have no legal authority to make those choices regardless of your relationship to Bobby." I pulled out the letter from Grandmother Rose and placed it on the table. "And this is what Grandmother actually thought about your decision-making, Mom." Patricia's face went ashen as she read the letter. For the first time since the meeting began, she seemed to understand that her actions had been anticipated and condemned by the very person whose wishes she claimed to be honoring. "Mrs. Thompson," Harrison continued, "we are prepared to file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. However, Bobby has authorized me to offer you one opportunity to resolve this matter without criminal prosecution." He slid another document across the table. "This is a settlement agreement. If you return every dollar that was stolen, plus interest and legal fees within 60 days, we will limit our action to civil recovery only. The total amount owed is $235,000. Marcus looked up from the settlement papers, his face desperate. We don't have that kind of money available. Most of it was invested in real estate. Then you'll need to sell the real estate, Harrison said matter-of-factly. The house, the rental properties, whatever is necessary to make full restitution. You want us to sell our home? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. I want you to return the money you stole from me, I said firmly. If that means selling assets you bought with stolen money, then yes, that's exactly what I want. Patricia finally spoke, her voice filled with venom. This is what I was trying to prevent. Your selfishness, your inability to think about anyone but yourself. Marcus has children to raise. He needs stability. Then he shouldn't have participated in stealing from his brother, Harrison interjected. Mrs. Thompson, these consequences are the direct result of choices that you and Marcus made. Bobby didn't create this situation. I looked directly at my mother, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger that I had never experienced before. Mom, you taught me that family takes care of each other. You taught me that honesty and integrity were the most important values a person could have. And then, you spent 2 years systematically lying to me and stealing from me while I trusted you completely. I was trying to protect this family, she repeated, but the words sounded hollow, even to her. You were protecting yourself and Marcus at my expense, I replied. And you were so arrogant about it that you made me feel guilty for even existing while you were spending my inheritance money on luxury vacations and designer clothes. Marcus finally looked up at me, tears in his eyes. Bobby, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Mom convinced me that you had agreed to everything, that you were okay with us using the money for family expenses. Even if that were true, which it isn't, what about the money you stole from my personal bank accounts? I asked. What about forging my signature on legal documents? Were you okay with that too? Marcus shook his head, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You fix it by returning every dollar you took, Harrison said. You have 60 days to liquidate assets and make full restitution. If you fail to do so, we'll file criminal charges and pursue both prosecution and civil recovery through the courts. And if we can't come up with all the money in 60 days? Patricia asked. Then, you'll face the full legal consequences of your choices, Harrison replied. Bobby has been more than generous in offering you this opportunity to avoid criminal prosecution. I stood up, looking at my family for what I knew might be the last time. I want you to know that I would have shared that inheritance with you if you had asked. If Marcus was struggling financially, if you needed help with anything, I would have been there for you. But instead of treating me like family, you treated me like a victim to be robbed. Bobby, please! Marcus started, but I held up my hand. I trusted you completely. I believed everything you told me. I felt guilty about my own success because I thought I was being selfish while my family was struggling. And the whole time you were living better than I was with money you stole from me. I picked up my copy of the settlement agreement and headed toward the door. You have 60 days to prove that family means something to you. After that, you'll be dealing with criminal prosecutors instead of me. As I left Harrison's office that day, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness that I hadn't expected. Justice was finally being served, but the cost was the complete destruction of the family relationships I had cherished for 28 years. But I also felt something else: freedom. For the first time in 2 years, I was no longer carrying the weight of their lies and manipulation. Whatever happened next, I would be facing it with the truth on my side, and the knowledge that I had fought back against people who had betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible. Patricia and Marcus had 60 days to prove they were capable of doing the right thing. Based on their track record, I wasn't optimistic about their chances. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home in the Park Hill neighborhood of Denver, looking out at the backyard where I planned to plant a vegetable garden that spring. The morning sunlight streamed through windows I actually owned in a house I had purchased with money that was rightfully mine after a legal battle that had restored not only my inheritance, but my faith in justice. The settlement process had been painful, but ultimately successful. Patricia and Marcus had managed to return $197,000 within the 60-day deadline, though it required selling Marcus's house, both of Patricia's rental properties, and liquidating most of their other assets. The remaining $38,000 was covered through a payment plan that would take them 3 years to complete. Marcus and his family had been forced to move into a modest apartment in Aurora, and the twins now attended public school instead of the private academy they had enjoyed while living off stolen money. Jennifer had returned to work as a dental hygienist, a job she had quit when Marcus's apparent wealth allowed her to stay home. Patricia had sold her investment properties and moved into a senior living community that, while comfortable, was a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she had been maintaining with my inheritance money. The financial reality she had claimed was fictional 2 years ago had become actual truth. But the most significant changes weren't financial. They were personal and emotional. Marcus had reached out to me a month earlier, asking to meet for coffee. The man who sat across from me at a small cafe in downtown Denver bore little resemblance to the smug, confident brother who had mocked me at that family dinner. He looked tired, older, and genuinely remorseful. "Bobby, I need you to know how sorry I am." He had said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know that doesn't fix anything, and I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need to say it anyway." "What changed?" I had asked, genuinely curious about his transformation. "Losing everything," he admitted. Living in that apartment, watching Emma and Grace adjust to their new school, seeing Jennifer work double shifts to help pay bills, and realizing that I did it all to myself by choosing to believe Mom's lies instead of trusting my own brother. "You knew it was wrong, Marcus. Even if you believed Mom's story about me agreeing to give up the inheritance, you knew the bank account transfers were theft." "I told myself I was just borrowing money," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "I thought I could pay it back before you noticed. But then Mom kept pushing for more and the lifestyle became so addictive. We were living like wealthy people and I didn't want to give that up." "What about now? Do you understand why I had to pursue legal action?" Marcus nodded slowly. "At first I was angry. I thought you were destroying the family over money. But watching my daughters adapt to their new reality, seeing them appreciate things they used to take for granted, I realized that the family was already destroyed. We destroyed it when we decided to steal from you. And Mom still thinks she was protecting the family. She's angry at you, angry at me, angry at the whole situation. But she's also had to face the consequences of her choices for the first time in her life." The conversation had been difficult, but healing. Marcus was learning to live within his means for the first time in years, and while the adjustment was challenging, he admitted it felt more honest than the lifestyle they had maintained with stolen money. 3 weeks after that coffee meeting, I received an unexpected visitor at my new home. Patricia stood on my front porch, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Her hair had gone completely gray, and she was wearing simple clothes instead of the designer outfits I had grown accustomed to seeing. "I suppose you're satisfied now," she said when I opened the door. "I'm satisfied that justice was served," I replied. "Would you like to come in?" She followed me into the living room, glancing around at the modest but comfortable furniture I had chosen carefully after years of saving and planning. "This is a nice house," she admitted grudgingly. "It's what I can afford with my actual income plus the down payment I was supposed to have from grandmother's inheritance," I said. "It's perfect for me." We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Patricia finally spoke. "I still think you overreacted," she said. "Family problems should be handled within the family, not in courtrooms. Mom, you stole money from me for 2 years. You forged my signature on legal documents. You manipulated grandmother's will and lied to me about being broke while living a luxury lifestyle with my inheritance. At what point did you think family loyalty required me to just accept that? I was trying to ensure that the money went where it could do the most good, she insisted. Marcus has children to support. You're young and single with a good career. That wasn't your decision to make, I said firmly. And it doesn't justify fraud and theft. Patricia was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the neighborhood where I had chosen to build my legitimate life. Your grandmother always said you were the most principled of her grandchildren, she finally said. I thought she was showing favoritism, but maybe she was just recognizing something I couldn't see. What do you mean? You would never have done what I did, she admitted. Even if you thought it was justified, even if you thought it was for the greater good, you wouldn't have stolen from family members and lied about it for years. It was the closest to an apology I had received from her, and while it wasn't enough to repair our relationship, it was acknowledgement that she finally understood the magnitude of what she had done. Mom, I would have shared the inheritance with Marcus if he had needed help and asked for it honestly. I would have helped with the twins' education, with medical bills, with anything he genuinely needed. But you took away my choice in that matter, and you made me feel guilty about my own financial stability while you were spending my money. I know, she whispered, and I don't know how to fix that. You can't fix it, I said honestly, but you can learn from it, and you can make sure it never happens again. Patricia nodded slowly and stood to leave. At the door, she turned back to me. I hope someday you can forgive me, Bobby. Not for my sake, but for yours. Carrying anger forever will hurt you more than it hurts me. I'm working on forgiveness, Mom. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending this never happened or trusting you with my finances again. It means accepting what happened and choosing not to let it define my future. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. The naive, trusting Bobby, who had believed his family's lies about being broke, was gone forever. But the person who had replaced him was stronger, more self-reliant, and more aware of his own worth. I had used part of the recovered inheritance to enroll in a graduate program in financial planning, specializing in elder abuse prevention. My experience had shown me how common family financial fraud was and how devastating it could be for victims. I wanted to help other people protect themselves from the kind of manipulation I had experienced. The rest of the money had gone toward purchasing my home and building an emergency fund that would ensure I never again had to depend on family members who might view my financial security as an opportunity for their own enrichment. But the most valuable lesson hadn't been about money at all. It had been about the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation, between love and control, between supporting each other and taking advantage of trust. Real family support meant celebrating each other's success, not resenting it. It meant asking for help when needed, not stealing when convenient. It meant protecting each other's interests, not sacrificing them for personal gain. Grandmother Rose had understood these principles when she structured her will to treat all her grandchildren equally. She had recognized that love wasn't demonstrated through favoritism or financial manipulation, but through respect for each person's individual worth and potential. As I finished preparing dinner in my own kitchen, in my own home purchased with money I had rightfully inherited and legally recovered, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for years. The family I had lost hadn't really existed anyway. It had been built on lies and maintained through deception. But I had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could stand up for myself when necessary, that justice was possible even when the odds seemed impossible, and that my grandmother's faith in my character had been justified. The most important inheritance she had given me wasn't money. It was the understanding that I deserved to be treated with honesty and respect, and that I had the strength to demand those things when they weren't freely given. Marcus was learning to build a life based on his actual income rather than stolen wealth, and while the transition was difficult, it was honest in a way his previous lifestyle had never been. Patricia was facing the consequences of a lifetime of manipulative behavior and was slowly beginning to understand the damage it had caused. And I was moving forward with a clear conscience, secure in the knowledge that when my family had tried to treat me like a victim, I had chosen instead to fight back and reclaim my dignity. Sometimes the most important battles we fight aren't against strangers or enemies, but against people who claim to love us while treating us with contempt. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating those people, but refusing to let their treatment define our worth or limit our potential. As I looked at the framed photo on my mantel showing Grandmother Rose and me at my college graduation, I could almost hear her voice telling me she was proud of the man I had become. Not because I had punished people who wronged me, but because I had stood up for principles she had tried to teach me about integrity, justice, and self-respect. Family isn't defined by blood relations or shared last names. It's defined by mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. By that definition, my real family consisted of people like Attorney Harrison, Investigator Martinez, and friend Daniel Rodriguez, who had helped me seek justice when my blood relatives had chosen deception and theft. The people who had raised me were strangers wearing familiar faces. But the people who had helped me fight for what was right had proven themselves worthy of the trust and loyalty I had once given so freely to those who had betrayed it. Have you ever discovered that people you trusted completely were living double lives at your expense? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for what was right, even when doing the right thing meant destroying relationships you thought were precious? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of standing up for yourself when family members cross legal and ethical boundaries, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening to my journey from victim to victor. Remember that you have the right to be treated with honesty and respect by everyone in your life, including family members. Never let anyone convince you that love requires accepting theft, fraud, or manipulation. Real love is demonstrated through integrity, not control. Until next time, stay strong and remember that justice is possible, even when it comes from the most unexpected places.